Cool. So I'm going to show how to paint this. All the sculpting stuff is, I've gone over most of that. I'll touch on some things when we get to it. One thing that I want to show when you do painting is you really want to think about the layers and how you're painting. This is a ZBrush skin texture stream time lapse. It's really good just to see an overview of the process. Even though it's an overview, it's 20 minutes long. But one thing to note is the colors that they're using here. They're using this yellowy color, red, and blue. Those are typically the color of your skin in those areas. Like your blood vessels are closer to your skin here, so you typically have more reddish areas if you look at paintings and photos. This is typically more of a bluish tone. This is typically more of a yellow tone. And then eventually, if I skip to the end of this, there it is. So you'll see how well those things can blend together. And if you look close enough, you'll actually be able to see where, if I can find a good angle, we are so close. Like that. You can see where this definitely looks a little bit more red. This looks like it has a little bit more yellow in it. And then this has a little bit more of a blue tint to it. It's subtle, but it's still there. And again, it does help our character read. Just like your sculpting stuff, you want to have reference. So on my other screen here, I'm going to have an image of some irises. So here are some irises. And I'm going to start off painting this, and then I'll get into the more complex character part of it. And then another day I'll show actually putting all the stuff together. So I'm going to start painting this. Before I do, I'm going to go and assign a material to it. So even though this is going to go inside of KeyShot, we still want to have some sort of material to give us some idea. There's these matte cap materials right here, so this material area right there. Down here are standard materials. These are the ones we want to use, and we can just stick to one of the basic ones here. So basic this or basic that, either one works. Okay, I can pick a color. So I'm just going to pick white for now. I think that's white. Yeah, it's white. And then I'm going to come up here to the top and do MRGB. And I'm just going to verify that I'm on the right item. I am. Okay, so I'm on that one. Okay. So I'm going to go through and paint this. The way that ZBrush works for materials is I picked a material, I picked a color, but nothing has been assigned yet to this object. Okay. If I come over here in my subtools, you'll see a little paintbrush. That means that something was assigned. So at some point I did assign something. So I'm just going to turn that off. And then if I cycle through my materials, there it goes. You can see how some of these materials are changing colors based on what I'm choosing there. I don't know why the color one isn't changing, but we'll ignore that. So I picked my material, I picked a color. I'm going to go up to color here and say fill object. And then that fills it with the material and the red, green, blue. So think of Substance. When we were in Substance, we could actually grab a paintbrush and we could paint color right on the model. We could also paint materials right on the model. That's how ZBrush is set up. If I were to choose that wood texture now, I don't know why it changed. It should not have changed because I picked the other one. There we go. Let's try that again. Color, fill object. Yes, you're filled. Okay. Maybe it's because of the kind that I'm picking there. If I pick chrome, yeah, there it goes. I don't know. All right, we're just going to leave it at that one. Make sure everything's set. Yes, okay. You can basically paint other textures on top of this, but we don't need to worry about that. We're rendering outside, so it's not going to affect it. Now, when I get into actually painting this, there are some options you can play with. If I go to the Material tab up here, and I use this little button, it'll actually like dock it on the left side. And then you can go under the modifiers, and you can adjust things like the ambient of the material. You can play with the diffuse. Here's specular, transparency, and so on all the way down the list. Okay. Some of these will not do anything. You just ignore them for now. There we go. Okay. So we just have a material. We just have a base color. Now I'm going to start painting some sort of color on top of this. As I do that, I want to make sure that I'm picked on red, green, blue up here, and I'm also not picked there. Okay, so as we sculpt, we're using the same tools that we would to paint. Okay, so those tools are the same exact thing. Up here is just defines what it is that we're doing. Are we sculpting or are we painting? So if I am in now RGB, and now I go pick a different color like this brown, orangey color, and then I just paint, it should be painting. It's not painting. Let me just make sure that all my other stuff is turned off. Maybe I have something else turned on here. Basic material, that, intensity. I'm just going to try my mouse just to make sure. Nope, nothing wants to paint. Intensity, this, that. I'm going to move this up. If you need to move layers up, you can do this. Typically, you don't need to, but I'm just going to do that. I'm going to try a different material. All right, I'm going to go and just make a new sphere. Okay, so that's working. And if I'm just done RGB, now that my tablet's working, ZBrush does not want to play nice. Let me just reboot. Now, one thing we'll note when we're doing this kind of painting is we're not doing any UV layout. So in Substance, what we would do is we would go into Maya, we would model something, we would UV lay it out, we'd bring it into Substance, and then we'd be able to texture it and paint it. Here, we work actually kind of backwards. We do what's called vertex painting, where we're actually painting the individual vertices of our character. I'm going to open up that one, maybe, this one. I'll open up that one. Maybe something's wrong with this one, it just doesn't want me to paint. So the more vertices we have, the more detail we can get. So if we have something that only has a few divisions on it and we start putting paint down, just like as we sculpt, it's only going to do like kind of a grainy looking sculpt. Same thing with painting. If we don't have enough divisions, the paint will look actually like pixelated on top of it. Now what eventually we're going to have to do is create a low-res version of our character that we could then lay out the UVs for and then project the texture back onto him. That part is actually not difficult because a lot of it is done inside of ZBrush, which is what makes ZBrush actually really streamlined because it actually does a lot of the work for us. You can get into customizing what the UVs look like, but usually you just kind of break up a couple pieces, lay them out, like ZBrush just lays it out, and then that's it. You just move on from there. Now, while we're waiting for this to open, we'll look at these irises and take note of some of the details here. So typically you're going to see lots of different colors, lots of different shades in here, just like we were before. But they're not going to be just like blue. So don't go into it thinking, I'm just going to grab blue and then I'm done. Nope, there's lots of different variations, especially in something like this. You can see there's dark purpley blues here, bright blues. There's even some little bits of orange there. And then where you have this little shelf, there's even some darker areas and then some yellowy areas right there. Here's another one. Even though this is like a brownish color, you can still see the different values that go into making that one look the way it looks. It's a creepy looking picture. That one's cool. Right? This one's really flat looking. You're creating a CG character. You want them to have some interest, so, you know, make it look interesting. That one's pretty cool too. All right. So let's try this again. I'm going to go to my subtool. I'm going to turn this off, turn this off. All right, so I'm just going to focus on this one eye right here. I'm going to go back to my material. I'm going to go back to basic material. I'm going to turn off the paintbrush. See, that's what I should have done before. This is exactly what, something's wrong with that file. MRGB, and turn that off. And I'm just going to go to color and then say fill object, okay? So what this does is it filled that object with this material, and it filled the object with that color. So typically you want to start off with your base color, so I'm going to start off with white, back to color, and then back to fill object, and there it is. Okay. I'm fine with any of the material settings right now. I'm going to switch this to RGB. I'm going to pick a different color. Good, nothing changed. I'm going to try painting. There it goes. That's what should have happened. I don't know what was going on with the other one. This one seems to work. Okay. So obviously some things that may help. One of them is going to be having symmetry. So I'm going to go under my transform, go under my activate, go to radial, and I believe this is Z and 12 is what mine was. Now you'll notice with this one, because of where this eyeball is, that my symmetry is actually really far away from this. This eyeball is moved up to where the eye actually is in the body, so the symmetry is not going to work from here. It needs to be at that area. So I'm going to switch to my move tool, and I'm going to go to unlock this, move this up here, move this over there, spin around a little bit, move this here. So I'm just moving my pivot and using the eyeball's roundness to kind of line up that shape. Whoop, I don't want that. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to lock it. And now if I hit home, will it jump back? Yes, it does. There we go. So now it jumped back home. The eyeball is also slightly rotated, so I'm just going to rotate this a little bit to get that lined up. And that should be good. Okay, my symmetry feels like it's really close. If it's not perfect, I can always adjust that. Switch back to the draw tool. Okay, so now I have my white color. I'm going to go in with some blues. Actually, I'll go in with black first. And I'm just going to fill in the pupil area with black. There we go. Okay, so you don't have to worry about the highlight right now. Just fill it in with black. Let it, soak up. This has 130,000 divisions. So if I were to get in here really close, get in with a small brush, and try to do any detail work, you'll notice that we're not really pulling anything off here. Like big work, sure, but tiny brush, you'll see it looks really grainy. So I may want to hit Control D on this just to add some more divisions, just to add some more detail, and then I can start to paint this. Just like you're sculpting, you never want to be at 100% intensity. You always want to build up to those values. So I'm going to drop this down to probably 10, and then just start putting in some different dark stuff right here. Okay, and I'm using this black just as where the valleys are, so wherever there's dips, that's where I'm putting it. I wouldn't put it black on these higher parts because it'll look weird. It's like that's a shadow, that's what we're getting there, so it makes sense to have this over there. So that's what I'm doing. There we go. And you'll see I bounce around a lot, so based on my hand position, sometimes I'm on the left side of this going like this, and then sometimes I'm on the right side going like that. It all depends on what's comfortable for me. So don't think like you have to stay within this one quadrant while you're doing it. It's just whatever's most comfortable for you to be able to get those lines straight. There aren't any really like wavy lines, like, there wouldn't be anything like that. Actually, if it disease maybe. All right. I'm going to go over here and grab a different color. Let's go and grab blue. Make my brush bigger. This is where you may want to play with your focal shift. I'm just going to come over here so you can see it. But as I start to paint this, you can see the edge is pretty soft. If I play with that focal shift and I push this out, now I'm going to create more of a hard edge, which we typically would see on some of these shapes. So this definitely looks soft, but it probably has more of a transition there than anything. So we do want to have some areas that are harder, some areas that are softer. So I'm going to go in with my brush kind of hard, and I'm just hitting it with this blue just a little bit. Okay. Now we can go and eyedrop. It has a really nice hotkey. You just hit C. So wherever your mouse is, you hit C, and then that samples that area. And then you can override what you've just done. So if I want that blue again, I can hit C. Now I have that blue. You can also smooth. So if I hold Shift, now I'm going to smooth my color transition. But just like everything else, I have to make sure that my Z add up here is turned off. Okay, make sure RGB is on, make sure Z add is off. And then when I go in here and smooth, now it'll blend between those two colors. So now I'm starting to get something that's looking more like an iris. Back over here to more of a dark blue color. Let's go and give this a little bit more darkness here. And think of this in stages. Don't think that you're going to like hit everything at once, like you're going to get it perfect. Think of just kind of building colors on top of other colors. And that's what's going to make the eye look the way it looks. So you'll see how I'm kind of coming over here and getting some of these dips. There we go. Cool. I'm going to go in with a lighter color. And then again, you'll see how I'm just kind of fanning out from the center, trying to get that. I'm going to look at it from different angles, see if I'm liking the way it looks. You know, maybe I want to add another shade of blue inside here. Something a little bit more duller. Maybe knock the intensity down. There we go. Maybe I'll introduce a complementary color in here, so I'll add orangey color. And again, anytime I'm doing this, I'm just being very subtle with it. Maybe I don't want this to be all over either. I'm going to go to my symmetry and just turn that off. Because if you look at the references, they all don't have the same symmetry. Yeah, I'm just kind of hitting some of these areas with some different values. And what's going to be cool about this is that once the eyeball is actually done, we should end up with a texture that has the eyeball texture on it. So if we did want to change the color some, we bring that into Photoshop. We can tweak what it looks like. Let's say we don't like this shade of blue. We can go into Photoshop and just tweak what that looks like. I'm going to punch that up a little bit more. I'm going to go a little bit more intense, a little bit smaller brush. Okay, and then what I'm doing here is just adding in little bits of highlighted coloring to it, just to again make it feel like there's a little bit more detail to that eye. There we go, that's good. I'm going to go with the blue. I'm going to do kind of the same thing. Maybe that's a little bit too purpley. There we go. So we'll say that's good for now. Okay, I can go, forever on this. If I were to smooth this out at this point, I'd probably lose all the detail that I had. It's gone. Okay, now there's nothing wrong with doing that and then coming back and adding more layers on top of that. But I wouldn't want to do that at this point if that was my final stage. Okay, I'm going to call this good for that eyeball for the moment. I think that's good enough for our demo. It gets the idea across. I would again just keep going back and just coloring in these things, looking at the lines that I drew before and adding that color to them. Something like this, I would go with that top layer and go with that really light bluish color, almost white. And then underneath it, I would have this darker color that would do that, and then I'd have this color that would go around there. Okay. So we're going to say that that's good. I want to give the eyeball some color too, so I'm going to go into the red. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to rotate, super small. And this part typically isn't seen, so I'm going to start back there and just build into this. This is going to be kind of like a reddish color. And I don't have symmetry on, so I have to kind of hit it from all sides. There we go. And this will help just give the eye a little bit of form. Good. Okay, so it does have some shape there, some red. Then I'm going to go in with a little bit darker red. I'm going to go into my alphas, and I'm going to find one of those vein things here. Maybe that one. I may have to just draw one, I think. I'm going to drag. And that's me dragging one. Nothing came on. Let's make this a little bit more intense. There we go. Yeah, I don't like that they're all like layered like that. Just going to set this back to alpha. Make sure my focal shift is down. Go in with a small brush. Oops, not drag. Back polka dots. And with a tablet, I can kind of give that a little bit of a look to that eye. So it has a little bit of vein work happening. Okay, unless you're trying to go with super creepy, you don't want to go, you know, too many veins. And you'll see how I'm kind of varying the weight. If I decide I don't like something, I can hit C, make my brush bigger, and then just erase it. There's no actual eraser, it's just like layering brushes on top of each other. So if I don't like those, go back and do that. Back to my red. Back to this. And I'm kind of just jittering my hand some as I do this. Okay? And then always go back further than you think you need to go back. Because what you don't want to do is end up cutting it short, and then your eyeball is here, and there's a weird vein that just like stops right before the thing. I'm not adding a whole lot down here because the eye lid is there. Same thing on top. So I think that should be good. Just adding a couple little veins on the side should be sufficient. I'm also going to maybe sample some of this dark area. And take that down some. And then I can go around this if I want to create that nice rounded shape. You can also use your masks. So those masks that I showed before, you can use those across the board for anything. So if I go to Mask Perfect Circle, hit OK. I hold Control, this will let me drag a perfect circle mask. Just like Photoshop, if I drag, hold the spacebar and then drag, it lets me move it. Then I can let go of the spacebar and then drag this again, hold the spacebar to adjust it. There we go. Okay, so now that shape is right there. Then I'm going to control click out here. That inverts it. If I control click on this, it will feather the edge. Okay, now I can go in with my brush and then just draw this darker edge around it, just to help give it that seal of, you know, this is where the edge of the iris ends. Now, if you don't want to see your mask as you're drawing, on the right side of my screen, scrolling all the way down here to masks, right there, you can just say visibility off. Just remember that it's on so that when you try to paint something that's not in that area, you don't freak out. There we go. So now you can see we're getting a nice crisper-ish line right there. Okay, when we're done, we just control drag out here, and that mask should go away. All right, so there is our textured eyeball. Okay, now this is not a huge deal. This is 520,000 divisions, which is, you know, it seems insane because our whole character is only a couple million. But we needed that for the detail. If we want to take this eyeball and then bring this into another application, it helps to have a low-res version of this eye. Fortunately for us, this is not a Dynamesh eyeball. As we were doing this one, we're just doing Control D to subdivide it. Okay, if I go into my geometry, I go to lower resolution, you'll see that I have one that is already a lower resolution, 130,000 divisions. Or I go to a higher resolution, that's the one I'm currently at. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to duplicate this layer. There we go. I'm going to go to my geometry, I'm going to go to lower resolution, and I'm going to say delete higher. Okay, so this one right here is a lower resolution eyeball than the other one. I don't want to go too low because then it'll be really blocky. If I was going to go video game, definitely, but we're rendering this, so I don't want to do that. I need to lay out the UVs on this. So under my Z plugin, under UV master, I'm going to go to unwrap all. Or sorry, unwrap, not unwrap all. There we go. I'm actually going to turn, it's thinking now. I was going to turn symmetry off, but it shouldn't matter for this. Now what it's going to do is it's going to just do an automatic mapping and then lay it out. So typically you're going to end up with one piece. There are ways to separate them so that you can get different iterations of them, different looks to them. But for this, we don't need to worry about that. This project even though we're fitting it in within like a 3-week, 4-week period. Typically, this is something that in Hollywood, they would spend months building this kind of thing, like a full-blown character with all the different layers, all the different levels, adding clothes to them, hair to them, all of that stuff. They would actually go from here. They would do a low-res version. They would bring that into Maya, and they would build on top of that low-res version an actual nice, smooth wireframe. This, because we're just rendering it, we can kind of create a clumpy one. All right, so let's see what these UVs look like. If you don't like going into the UV editor, that's perfect because there is none here. We just went to unwrap, that unwrapped the eyeball. Then we go to flatten, and then we can see what the UVs look like. There it is. So that's what our UVs look like, okay? Now I'm going to go back to Z plugin. I'm going to go back to unflatten. It looks kind of weird because we've lost our texture. Now it looks like we're seeing some of it, but if we look over into our subtools, we're actually seeing two objects stacked on top of each other. So I'm going to turn the eyeball off of this eyeball, and now we're just seeing this one. There's our UV laid out one. I'm going to come down here to the bottom. Oop, not yet, sorry. I'm going to go to this. Now that it's UV'd, I'm going to Control D to add subdivisions to it. That should be good. I'm going to turn this eyeball on, turn that eyeball on, and then I'm going to go to Project and say Project All. Now what this is going to do is our painted eyeball is textured with each vertice is colored. This other one has the UVs laid out, but there's no picture on it. So I need to get the color information onto this one. So this Project All should take the color information from this one and transfer it to that one, okay? Now this process right here is used all over the place. Typically what people will do is they'll take a high-res model that they've done like photogrammetry on, or they've done a scan on, or some way, and they have, let's say, there's a video out there, you can look it up, it's a shoe. They take this high-resolution shoe image that's millions of polygons, they bring it in, they create a low-res version of the shoe, a high-res version of the shoe, and they do this. And what it does is it just takes all of that detail from the high-res one and smashes it onto the low one. And then you have something you can work with. So now that Project All worked, okay? Now notice I only had the 2 items on. If I had more items on, all that stuff would project in there. You don't want that. So I'm going to turn that one off. I'm going to go to this one. And then I'm going to go down to my texture map. Sorry, UV map first. I'm going to pull this up to 8,000. I'm going to go to, not there, I'm going to go to texture map, and I'm going to say new texture. So this is actually building the texture. And then I'm going to go to create from polypaint. Okay, so now what it does is it then takes that polypaint information, transfers it to the UVs. So if I click my mouse here, well, I can't see it bigger. If I go to texture, and nope, we still can't see it bigger there. You see it right there. Okay, there's the texture. Now I'm just going to export this out. So I'm going to go to my it's right there, multi-map exporter. There we go. And this is where we can export out all of our maps. Okay, I'm not going to do this yet. We'll do this later. But this is where we can actually export these out, put them on disk, and have those kinds of things set up. Now, I did this at the highest resolution. So I took that original sphere, I shrunk the resolution to 120,000, laid out the UV so it goes quicker. The more divisions you have, the longer it takes, so it goes quicker. Then I upped the resolution, projected the texture, and then I lowered the resolution again. Okay, cool. So that works for that. Now when I do the character, I'm just going to turn off the eyeball after it's done saving. I'm going to delete my undos too. Like I said, ZBrush doesn't crash typically. But all these undos that it has to save, I think it was like at 800 last time I opened it up. Now there was a program, I guess I'll show that while we're waiting for this to save. Mari, Nuke, oops, not Nuke, Foundry. So Nuke is made by the Foundry. There's another software called Mari that's also made by the Foundry. We used to use Mari for doing our texture painting. This is before Substance was really popular. And it just so happened Mari stopped working on these computers because of their video card around the same time that Substance was becoming more popular. So a lot of character work, like painting character work, is done inside of here, but you can do either one. You can do hard surface or soft. But a lot of this was done inside of, or all these were done inside of Mari, all this texture painting. It has a lot of tools for actually, instead of painting colors, you're actually projecting textures. You're bringing a picture of skin, and then you're painting the skin right on the person. So you get that extra level of detail. All right, so that's saved. I'm going to come down to my undos, if I can remember where they were. Nope. Preferences, in here, undo Q. It'd be so great if there was just a search for stuff. Undo history, there we go. So right now it saves 10,000 different undos. That seems excessive to me. I'm just going to click, and I'm going to put 2. And then I'm going to go back, and then I'm going to go back to my preferences. Actually, let me save this. There we go. Goblin pose. There we go. And this should help clear out my undo history. So that bar that's at the top right, come on, right here, there we go. We have 17 undos, that's all we have right now. Good. So I'm going to go back to this, and I'll set this to like 300. I'm fine with that. Okay. So now I'm going to go to my character, and we're going to do the same exact thing to the character, obviously just for the characters stuff though. So here is my high-res character. I'm going to just make sure that all my other ones are turned off. Off. And then we'll get into a couple more tools. And some of these you may even want to use for your eyes, but we'll see. So first thing I'm going to do is turn off his paintbrush. So he's back to being a default color. Whatever my basic material was, whatever the color here is, that's what he is. I'm going to start off with just a kind of like whatever I want his skin color to be. What was my other one? I think my other one was this color. So I'm going to go with something weird like that. But kind of muted also. If you go with something too crazy, it looks fake. So something like that feels more like a skin tone. I'm on MRGB. Make sure this is 100. If this is 5 and you do fill object, it'll fill it with 5% and your stuff won't stick. Color, fill object. Now, unfortunately, you don't see some of this stuff, so it might look like it's colored. You make a texture, you go into Keyshot, and your character is like white with this like purplish tint to it versus this bright purple that we've chosen here, okay? So just be aware of that. So I'm going to go with this. Actually, I'm going to go to 100 first. Now, a cool trick that I found is to use this underside as kind of like a palette. So as you get colors, throw them in down here. Then you can just sample right from that area. So I'm going to go with this reddish color like that. And then I'm turning off my symmetry for a second. Actually, I need a little more red, I think, like that. There we go. I'm going to go to a bluish color. And then the trick was to don't change this, just slide this around. And there's a yellow color. And then now I'll slide this over and get like a softer yellow. Okay? So now anytime I need those colors, there they are. I can just jump to the bottom, hit C, and then I have that color. Versus trying to pick the exact color, and I end up with 17 different reds that are on my character. Cool. So I'm going to go on here, hit C on that red. Then I'm going to lower this to not all the way, but pretty low. Let's say 20% or so. Symmetry is on. There we go. And let's take our focal shift down some. And then remember, this was the red area right here. That's way too low still. And if it helps, oops, whatever. it helps have that image up of what the character would look like with those different zones. Okay, don't be afraid to go a little bit higher than you think you need. And you'll see I'm being really aggressive with this, because the idea here is that I'm going to lay down these foundations, then I'm going to use my C to pick in the middle of them and then start blending these colors together. All right, so I think that's pretty good for that. Let's go into the mouth area there. There we go. And then let's grab some of the blue. And I'm just focusing on this. You do the whole face, okay? Like the whole torso part. So typically where you're bonier, you're not going to have a lot of those blood cells close to the face, so you're not going to have that. Don't forget to paint the underside. That's typically something people do. A little bit of red there. Back to my blue. That's good for now. And then we'll grab some of the yellow. Let's grab that yellow. And again, don't be afraid to just go big with the brush. A lot of times as beginners we go really subtle and it does more harm than good when you have, the brush is too small and you're trying to fit in all these details. Or you're trying to get one area perfect before you move on to the other areas. There we go. If I put on makeup, I think that's what I'd look like. All right, so let's go here now. We're going to go and hit C in this area and then start to blend some of this in. So I just hit C in that purpley zone, and now I'm just blending those colors. If I hit C in this more purpley pure zone, I can start to layer that on top. And then what you're going to see is you're going to start to see these colors just blending a lot more naturally and feeling a lot more realistic than we had obviously a second ago. And I haven't really done anything. I'm not like, I'm going with the direction of where these two lines converge, and that's where I'm spending most of my time. But I'm not like going insane about trying to get the details perfect at this point. It really is just about kind of laying down that foundational color of what the skin would look like. Now remember, that other video was 20 minutes of a time lapse. I don't expect you to have a photorealistic one, but it should be appropriate. Like this is like kind of silly looking. We wouldn't want this. So I do want you to have that detail in your character, but I don't expect you to spend 17 hours just on the paint. And maybe go a little bit more intense on this brush. Okay, and I just keep sampling different areas of the purple. Usually you'll just pick up something a little bit different based on what other values have been put down there, and that just helps kind of blend everything together. If you remember from like Photoshop 1, most of you probably painted some sort of organic object. This is the same exact assignment. It's just we're doing it on a 3D character. All right, and if something gets too heavy, like this blue is just not coming off, then just be a little bit more aggressive with it. Just take your intensity up some, and just remember you have those undos. Usually what happens is, with something not working out right, is you get through this whole process, you bring it in to render it out, and sometimes you even render it out, and then you realize that you have like a big glob of blue or red or green or whatever color is there. So do move around quite a bit on your character. If you stay in one place too long, you're going to miss stuff. So that looks pretty decent for a good starting for the character. Okay, we have this kind of reddish tone here. we have these kind of bluish tones. If I need to add a little bit more in there, I can just zip down here and grab some more, lower the intensity some, and then start to drop it into that area. Okay, I think this is probably a little bit too yellow still, so I'm going to smooth that out. All right, so now some other tools that might come in handy are in this masking zone, right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask by cavity. And what this does, it'll actually look for any cavities, any dips in the skin, and it'll create a mask based off of that information. Typically, you have to play with the blur a little bit and the intensity and the cavity profile. Okay, so I'm just going to hit mask by cavity. Sometimes it takes a second to load, but you'll see that there it is. And then if I needed to adjust it, I can click on this cavity profile and just adjust what that looks like and then hit that button again. So this is basically just going to pick up different values, like, you know, how deep does it have to be before you've picked up that cavity. So you'll see here that's not picking up a whole lot. As I go further down this way and then I do it, it's picking up a whole lot of areas. Okay, so you can really kind of customize that. And then also the intensity of it. Okay, so right now it doesn't look like a lot is there, but what's doing is it's picking up those cavities, but it's not like 100% of a selection. It's like part of it. So I'm going to lower this blur a little bit. I'm going to up the intensity a bit, mask by cavity again, and then we'll see where we're at. Typically I like to turn the mask off as well. And then just to test it out, I'm going to go with a really bright, really intense color. And I'm just going to draw. And what we can see is this is actually masking the opposite of the cavity. Okay, so I need to hit undo, control click out here to invert my mask. You can also click inverse. And so now when I go in here, I should be painting more in the cavity area. I think I need to take my profile up a little bit more, intensity up a little bit more, then do it again, then control click again, then turn that off again. And then as I paint now, there you go. You can see the cavity stuff is starting to come out. And the idea with that is, you know, if you look at someone, they have wrinkles, they're not going to be the same color as their skin. They're going to be some sort of difference there. Typically, if you have a scar, it's going to be like a lighter color than your skin. Or maybe it's going to be red around the scar area. So now that I know it works, now I can go and pick a different color. Typically, I hit C to grab the color of the area. And then I'll just come over here and maybe darken it a smidge. Pull this down some. And then all I'm doing here is just, again, just kind of adding in some extra values there. Keyshot may lose some of these when we take it from here into Keyshot. So this is just going to help us kind of bring those values with us. Maybe I'll pull that up a little bit more. Okay, obviously don't go too crazy with it because it can really get, you know, too much if you have obvious lines in the character. You can still use shift to smooth things out. You still may want to play with that RGB intensity. Let's go with actually a lighter color up here. So I'm going to hit C. I'm going to desaturate this some. And what you'll see sometimes too is that you're actually going to pick up lines that you didn't even realize that were really there, as vibrant as you're seeing them here. Now something like this, this actually looks more like he has a growth. He has like scales or something. So with that, I'm actually going to go with the lighter color inside the scale area, like, you know, the pivoty area. Again, if you're not sure if it's even doing it, pick a vibrant color and then try it out. Then hit undo, and then pick the color you want. I do that a lot just to make sure that it is actually doing something. So I'm lightening this area just to make those things pop out a little bit more. And then I can control click out here. Remember that swaps my mask. Just don't view it. I'm going to go with a darker color, desaturated. You really want to avoid super bright, vibrant colors when you do these detail things because you don't want like this bright red just to pop on the character. There we go. So stuff like that seems pretty good. Maybe I'm just going to intensity this a little bit lower. There we go. Okay. You can mask by other things too. So one thing is masking by smoothness, masking by peaks and valleys, masking by color and alpha don't really apply to what we're doing. There's also masking by AO. This one, just so you're aware of it, I clicked it on mine before, and literally 10 minutes before I got anything back. So depending on what you have, it will take longer to process. Once I'm done with that, I'm just going to control drag and then clear my mask off. And then I'm going to go in here and just do some more detail work. So things that you typically want to darken, the nostrils. So I'm going to go in here with the dark color. And ignore that flickering. And you don't want it to be fully, like completely black on the inside. And you don't want to have a line coming out here because that would look weird. But you do want to make it look like it's dark inside there. And then blend that in with your rest of your character. Okay, just some stuff is not going to render possibly as dark as we want it. And so this is just going to get us there. There we go. So now we have some sort of darkness right here at the base of the nose. And then we would do the same thing in the ears. Let's drop this down to a dark value. We're going to imagine that that's where the ear hole would be. Oops. And then blend. And then blend that. Oops. Too much blending and too intense. Okay. And then even when it comes to the lips, we would also go into the lip area right where they meet, and we would crease some of that as well. Okay, and this is again for that same reason. If we don't do this, it's going to look like the lips are kind of like soft, and it won't really make sense. Go, and then I'm just going to take my intensity down and then start to give the lips, bless you, some shade here. And even though we're going to light this inside of Keyshot, we still want to incorporate some sort of highlighting inside there. So like where the lips are at, we would actually add the little lines for some of these highlight points. So not too far in. There we go. So I'm just kind of following the contours of the character. Adding some highlights there, and then doing a little bit of blending to smooth those out. Usually an area that I overlook is the lip area right here. If I smudge too much, just to make this obvious, if I go like this and I still leave some there, it's very obvious that it it's not lined up. So do take your time getting in nice and close and really filling in those lips. And then coming out here and then just kind of backfilling in the correct color. And then don't forget to zoom out too, because you will find that you typically forget stuff, like I do. You're kind of focused on just that one area, and then you get out here and it's like, oh, I've forgotten you know, those edges of the lips. And again, don't be afraid to undo stuff or redo it if you need to. Cool. All right. If you do intend on adding some sort of bright color to your character, do it in a spot that makes sense. Like there really doesn't make sense. It just looks silly. But here, there might be some reason for why he has this stripe. And so that might be a good spot to add some sort of line work. Oops, I haven't undone far enough, apparently. There we go. So if I had something like this, it would make more sense maybe to have that line work happening here versus happening it just randomly on the face. I don't like it there. I don't like that color. Maybe I'm going to go with something darker and dingier. And focal shifted this way and that. A little bigger. And you'll see people, if you watch online, people sculpting, and that's usually where just watching them, not even following along, just watching people sculpt and paint, you'll pick up a lot of stuff. Sometimes they'll undo that same stroke 15 times just to get it the right angle the first time. Okay? I don't know if you can see it too well, but there's actually like a dark spot right there. Okay? I started my brush, and then I realized I forgot this little piece. So I'm going back over it, and now I've like thickened up this one area. So I have to use Shift to try to smooth it out, or I have to hit C to grab the color here and then try to fill this area in. You know, whatever I have to do, I'm going to do that, because if I go too far into the process, it's going to be a pain to have to go back and redo all this. I've done it. It's the only way to do it is to, you know, redo stuff sometimes. And if you don't like something, you can just go back over it. If I don't like that, I can hit C, cover it back up with something else, and then go in with whatever color I want to go with after that. Okay? So that's as far as I'm going to take this character today. He's a little bit more of a setup because we don't have a low-res version of him already. Okay? But the process is going to be the same, just kind of building those layers one after the other to get the character to look the way you're trying to get him to look. I'm not typing anything at all. Character, face, painting. I think time-lapse also is part of that thing. There it is.